This is day 23 of the 30-day Excel challenge. And today we're going to be talking about dynamic array functions. So what are dynamic array functions and why do we need them? Sometimes Excel formulas break without warning. So for example, you add a new row and suddenly your totals are not correct, or your chart isn't updating, or the filter is just ignoring the new data you've just added. And sometimes that happens because your formula is hard-coded. So that simply means it's fixed to a specific range. So if you have a formula, and you've actually typed in the cell references inside it. So A2 to A10, that's hard coding. And in data in general, that's a problem because usually you're working with data sets that either grow or shrink all the time. So in general, hard coding is not a good habit because it makes your spreadsheets harder to maintain. And that's actually why we need dynamic array functions. So a dynamic array function resizes your data automatically as your data grows. And they also spill results into the cells nearby them. So you don't actually need to drag down your formulas anymore. But I'm going to show you some examples so that you can see how it actually works. We're going to start with a few data sets, right? So as you can see, this is an employee data set. And we're going to start with the unique function. So use the unique function if you want to remove duplicates from a range. So let's say I want all the unique departments showing in this data set. How do I go about doing that? So I'm going to type in unique. Then I just simply select all the values in the department column. Hit enter. And there we have it. So even though this has about 6 records, this has uniquely identified all the departments inside this column. So we can see we have 3 departments: IT, finance, HR, all thanks to the unique function. It's that simple. The sort function helps you sort values from lowest to highest or highest to lowest. So if I want to list all the names inside this data set in alphabetical order, I can do just that. Use the SORTBY function if you want to sort a range by values from another column. I'll just show you how this works. So I'm going to type in SORTBY. The first argument, I'm going to select name or names. The second argument, I'm going to select salary. So that's the column I want to sort by. And then the third argument, I'm telling Excel I want this in ascending order. So that's going to be from lowest to highest. And if I close that, hit enter. So Excel has actually sorted the names, this time by salary, starting with the person with the lowest salary, moving up all the way to the person with the highest salary. So in other words, the names are sorted based on salary from lowest to highest. And if you want to sort from highest to lowest, just type in -1 in the third argument. If you want to filter data based on the condition, use the filter function. I'm just going to type in the filter function. And the first argument is your data set. So I'm just going to select the entire array. The second argument is the condition we want to filter the data by. So we only want the records where the department is IT. So I'm just going to select all the values in the department column, and then I'm going to type equals IT. And then the third argument is what we want the formula to return if there are no matches. So I'm just going to type in, let's say, no IT employees found. And then I close that. And there we have it. So we only have 3 employees who belong to the IT department. So let's move on to another data set so that we can explore some more examples. So this data set contains a list of products and their starting SKUs. So SKU is just a code that uniquely identifies each item in a stock room or inventory. So let's explore the sequence function. If you want to generate a sequence of numbers dynamically, then this is when you want to use the sequence function. So this is going to help you generate things like SKU ranges or row IDs without having to type them manually. So I'm just going to show you how this works. So I'm going to type in sequence to call the sequence function. So the first argument is how many row of numbers you want. So in our case, let's go with 5. The second argument is how many columns you want to fill. So for us, it's just going to be 1. And the third argument is where you want to start the sequence. So for us, we want to start it with the first SKU here. So it's going to be cell B2. And the fourth argument is how much you want to increase each number by. So we want to count up by, let's say 1. Then I'm just going to close that, hit enter. So as you can see, we're now creating SKU numbers for each product in a sequence. So if I was to reduce this to 3, the first argument that is, it's now limited to 3 rows. If I type, let's say 10, it's now generated numbers dynamically into 10 rows. If I change the second argument to, let's say, 3, as you can see, it's now generated numbers into 3 columns. If you want to generate a bunch of random numbers, then use the rand array function. So I'm going to show you how that works. So I just call rand array. So the first argument is the number of rows we want. So let's say 7. The second argument is the number of columns. So we can say 1. The third argument is the smallest number we want. So let's say 65. The fourth argument is the largest number we want. So we can say 84. And the fifth argument is whether you want whole numbers or not. So type true if you do, and type false if you want decimals instead. So I'm going to close that. And as you can see, we have a bunch of random numbers now. So once again, if you play around with the first argument, let's change that to, let's say, 12. It's going to spill into 12 rows. If you change the second argument to, let's say 5, it's going to spill into 5 columns. If you change the third argument, that's going to adjust the minimum value that's allowed. So if I say 2, you can start seeing smaller numbers included. And if I change the fourth argument to, let's give a big number, let's say 300,000, you now start seeing large numbers appear. And if I change that to false, it's going to change the results to decimals. As you can see right there, it's now accepting decimals. Now let's move on to another data set to explore some more functions. So let's talk about CHOOSECOLS function. So use the CHOOSECOLS function if you want to convert multiple columns and rows into one single column. So if I want all of this inside one column, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to type in CHOOSECOLS, and then I'm simply just going to select this range. And as you can see, everything you see there is now included in one single column. So basically, it's flattened all of the quarterly sales into one column. And because you're able to squeeze several numbers in rows and columns into one column, a clever way to use this is actually inside another function that would need an output like this. So we're going to explore an example like this in a few moments. Use the toRow function when you want to convert multiple columns or rows inside a single row. So I'm going to show you how that works. So let's type in toRow. And then the first argument, I'm going to select all the regions here. I'm actually going to hit the space. And then I'm going to include the AND operator. And then I hit space again. And then I hit a double quote. And then add a colon, hit space, add another double quote to close that. And then I add AND operator again. Don't worry, it's going to make sense in a moment in case you're not following. And then add space again. And then I'm going to select all the values here, all the sales values. And then I'm going to close that. So let's see if this works. There we go. So as you can see, this is a single row. And it's actually combined each region and the sales they've made in each quarter. So if I just expand that a little bit, as you can see, this is the North region. That's right there. This is the North region again, which is right there. The North region once again, quarter 3, North region for quarter 4, and then we move on to the South, and so on and so forth. So all of the regions and their corresponding values for each quarter have been lined up in a single row. So let's move on to our next data set. So as you can see, we have 2 tables, and they both contain products and sales. If you want to stack one table on top of another table, then use the vstack function. So let's say we have a product sales table for 2024 like this, and we have another one for 2025. And what we want to do is we want to stack them into a single list instead of having 2 separate tables. So what we'll do is we're going to call this vstack function, and then we'll include all of the data here. So that includes the header and the values. And then we'll only include the values or the records inside this table because we already have the header included here. So I'm just going to close that. And there you have it. If I was to blindly include all of this and then include all of this, what's going to happen is it's going to include the header names for the second table inside our data set, just like this. So we don't want that. So remember, just be careful when you're using the VStack function. You only want to include the entire dataset here, so the header names and the values, or the records. And then you only want to include the values themselves from the second table and beyond. So now the result is one clean table that combines all the records together, just like we wanted. If you want to merge tables side by side now, then use the hstack function. So how does this work? We're going to call the hstack function, and then we'll select our first table, so the entire first table, and then we select only these two fields here because we've already included the product column already. So if we were to close that, so now we have one view that has the historical sales and the forecast tables merged with each other side by side. The wrap calls function arranges data into the number of columns you specify. So the first argument of the wrap calls function is the data you feed it. And the second argument is how many rows you want to populate until you break into a new column. So I'm just going to add a bunch of random products. Right, so I've just added my data set. So remember, the first argument is the vector. So that's just the list of items you want to lay out. And the second argument is how many items Excel should break into a new column. So I'm just going to type 3, and then I'm just going to close that. So as you can see right there. So what we're telling Excel to do is keep stacking the items on top of each other in a column. When you've reached 3 items in a column, break into a new one, just like this. So with this function, what we've managed to do is we've managed to create a 4x3 grid. So 4 columns with 3 rows, and they all contain product names. So now we're going to play around with this sales transaction log, and we're going to start with the take function. So the take function will extract the number of items you want from the beginning or end of an array. So how this works is you type in take and then select your entire data set. That's going to be your first argument. And then the second argument is how many rows to return from the top. So in our case, we're going to say, let's say 3. And the third argument is how many columns to return from the left. So in our case, let's just say, we're going to say 5. Got 5 columns returned. And then hit enter. And as you can see, it's managed to do that. So it's managed to extract the 3 rows, the first 3 rows from the top, and then the 5 columns from the left. And that's what you can see right there. The opposite of the take function is the drop function. So this removes the number of items from the beginning or end of an array. You can actually use this to filter data if you want. I'll call the drop function. And then the first argument is going to be the array or the dataset. And the second argument is how many rows you want to drop. So I'm just going to type 2. So let's see how this goes. So as you can see, it's dropped the first 2 rows from the top. If you want to drop columns as well from the left, then add in your third argument. So let's type in 3. So as you can see, it's extracted this section here. So we told our function to drop the first 2 rows and the first 3 columns, which is what it's done right here. And if you want to compare it, you can see right there. There you have it. Use the CHOOSECOLS function if you want to select specific columns from a range. So I'll just show you what that looks like. And if you've used SQL before, this is like using the select statement and specifying the column numbers you want returned. So just call the CHOOSECOLS function. So the first argument is going to be your entire data set. And every argument after that is actually just the column numbers you want included or you want to keep. So let's say we want to keep the second column and the fourth column. Enter. And there you have it. So the first column is the transaction ID column. The second column is the date column. And the fourth column is the amount column, as you can see there. Use the choose rows function if you want to select specific rows from a range. So you can use this to filter your data set as well. So it's similar to the choose columns function. So I'll just show you how that works. So choose rows, you want to call that function. And then you want to select your entire data set. Now, the first row we want to keep would be the headers, so which is row 1 in this case. And then let's say we want to keep the third row and we want to keep the fifth row. and then we hit enter. So now we have the headers, which is the first row, and we have this one here, and we also have this one. So we've managed to keep the first, third, and fifth rows. So let's dive into more examples. Use the text before function to extract the text before a character. So we have all these emails here. If I want to extract the username from the emails, for example, so all the usernames before the @ symbol, this is how I'm going to do it. I type in text before, and then the first argument will simply be the values in the email column, and the second argument will be the @ symbol. I hit enter. As you can see, I've managed to extract the usernames from the email addresses. Use the text after function if you want to extract text after a character. So very similar to the text before function. If I want all the characters after the @ symbol, all I need to do is call the text after function, select all the values in the email column, and then in the second argument, we're going to use the @ symbol again, hit enter. And as you can see, we now have the domain names from the email addresses. So let's look at one final example now. And this is going to be the text split function. So you want to use the text split function when you want to split text into multiple pieces based on a delimiter. So as you can see, we have a list of addresses, and the comma is the delimiter we can see inside this data. So it's separating the street name from the city, the state, the zip code, etc. So how does this work? We call the text split function, and then we're going to call the first cell. So not the entire data set and not all the values inside a column. We're actually selecting the very first cell. And then we type a comma. And then for the second argument is where we type in our delimiter. So I'm going to type comma, and then I'm going to hit enter. So as you can see, it's actually split each address into street, city name, the state, and the zip code. So if you wanted to, you can actually, so let's just put that there for a second. So I can call this street, then call this city, I call this state, and then I call this zip code. And then what I can do is I can drag this down just like that. And you can do the same thing with things like maybe full names or references, whether you're tagging IDs to full names, etc. So let's move on to our exercise. Let's imagine we're a volunteer helping a nonprofit, and this nonprofit helps elderly people in need. So they rely on donations from the general public as well as organizations. However, they're storing everything in one big spreadsheet. They want to know more information about their donors. So they're asking questions like who's donated to us, who are our top donors, and how many people are using PayPal. So what we're going to do is we're going to now use dynamic array functions to help answer these questions. So we'll go through them one by one. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with who has donated to us. So we need to get a clean list of all the unique donors from here. So at the moment, if we were to just count how many we've got, that's about 150 different records. So some of these may be the same donors just donating more than once. But what we need to do is we need to now create a unique list of donors, or rather a list of unique donors. And if you remember, the unique function only returns the unique values from a list. So we're going to use it to answer this question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just go into, let's say this field here. I'm going to type in list of donors, and then I'm going to add in the unique function. Then I'm just going to select all the names within the name column, and then all I need to do is just type enter. And as you can see, we have a list of unique donors now. So that should answer our question. And if we want to count how many unique donors we have, then we can use the row function. So the row function is simply going to count how many names the unique function gave us. So how this is going to work, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in number of unique donors, and then just scroll to the right a bit. And then I'm going to type in rows, and then I'll type in the unique function that we just used, so unique, and then I'll just select all the names, close the unique function, and then close the rows function with brackets. Hit enter. And we have 50 unique donors listed. And if you want to confirm whether this works or not, you can actually copy all the names and then enter another spreadsheet, paste all those values, and then you can go to data and then remove duplicates. And then make sure column A is selected, hit OK. And as you can see, 100 duplicates were found and 50 unique values remain. So that goes to show that our rows operation worked. So now we can see how many different people are actually supporting this nonprofit, which is great. So we can actually mark this as good or completed. Now, who are our top donors? So what we want to do now is we want to rank all the donations from the highest to the lowest. So this is where we use a function like SORTBY. So for this one, let's open up a new spreadsheet. And then we can even type in our question. So who are our top donors? And then we can merge and center. And then we're going to use the sort by function. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our data set. And it's going to be our first argument. Now, the second argument is what we want to sort the data set by. So we want to sort by donation amounts because we want to find out who the top donors are. And then we're going to say descending so that we select with the highest donors first or the highest donation amounts first. And then we see the ones with the lowest donation amount and then hit enter. And that's our data set there. Then you can just rename this to top donors. And that's that question answered. Now, the third one is how many people are using PayPal? So what they want to do now is they now want to know which payment methods are the most popular. We need to extract only the PayPal donations for now. So we can actually enter a new sheet. We could call this PayPal donations. How many people are using PayPal to donate? Then merge and center. We'll just expand this a bit. So we're going to use the filter operation for this. And the first thing we want to do is we want to select the entire data set once again. That's going to be our first argument. And the second argument is going to be the condition we want to filter the data by. So we're going to select all the values within the payment method. And this has to be equal to PayPal because we only want the PayPal donations showing. And then the third argument, if you remember, is what we want returned if there are no matches. So we can say no PayPal matches. We'll just say no PayPal matches. Hit enter. Then I just expand this a bit. So if you want to find out how many unique donors use PayPal to donate money, then we can use the rows function again. And then we type in unique. We can just select all the values in the name column. And as you can see, we have 28 people who donate money to this charity using PayPal. Donors who use PayPal, let's say. And there you have it. So if you want to take it to the next level, what if we only want to see the 10 most recent donations? Now, we've answered that question. Now, out of curiosity, what if we want to see the top 10 donations on this list? How do we go about doing that? So I can type in top 10 donations. It's literally the top 10 records on the dataset. So what does that look like? We can use the take function to help us out. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the entire data set. And then we're simply going to type 10 because we're telling it to give us the top 10 records or grab the first 10 rows from the data set. Then we hit enter and there we have it. So we can just name this top 10 records. Now, there is a lot of information inside this data set. So can we create a simpler view that shows only the name and let's say the amount columns? If we choose the CHOOSECOLS function, then we definitely can do this. So let's call this simple view of donations. Let's just say. So let me just zoom in quickly. And then we type in CHOOSECOLS, and then we select our donations data set again. And then we're going to select the second column and the third column. So the second column is the name column. The third column is the donation amounts column. Hit enter. And as you can see, for those who want to see the name and the donation amounts, they can see just that. So we've managed to answer all the questions, as well as go the extra mile of helping individual users get bespoke versions of the data sets that we have here. So if you forget everything that we've gone through today, what should you remember? Use dynamic array functions when your data is likely to grow or shrink. So when that happens, your results update instantly, and you don't actually need to drag down formulas or build helper functions. So it's really a game changer. So you're going to find a workbook to practice with in the GitHub link in the video description. But until then, I hope you learned something new today. Stay blessed.